that the purpose of memory is to provide you with a map of what to do so that you can be secure where you are. And maybe more than that, so that you can be secure and gain advantage, you know. You can get what you need and want from the circumstance. That would be even better. But you know, lots of times you'll just settle for nothing terrible happening. If you can add some additional gain to that, so much the better. You know, maybe you learn that nothing happens to you in the playground that's upsetting, or maybe you learn that it's a great place to make friends, and that's even better. And then part of exploring the playground would be going out to make friends, and hopefully your mother, in some sense, is somewhat hands-off about that so that you can bang yourself up against the world a bit and learn what you need to learn about how to negotiate friendships. Now, let's go back to this guy who's having the murderous fantasies. Now, he's humiliated in high school. So you ask yourself, why? Well, there's a pretty good literature on bullying, and generally, bullies poke at all sorts of people, and they start with little pokes, and if they can get a response that's gratifying to their desire to shame, then they'll keep attacking. But they start off small, and not everybody gets bullied. Most people get bullied some when they're kids, but some people are targeted fairly frequently, and they're people who tend to react in the manner the bully wants. And perhaps there are also people who don't defend themselves very well when the first pokes occur. You know, they don't have a quick word in response. They won't stand up for themselves. They retreat. They get over emotional. So then you might ask yourself, well, why would that be? Well, if your mother is operating properly in the playground, she's there when you run back and you need her. She's not there behind you when you don't need her, making sure nothing bad happens to you. And, well, why? Well, because bad things are going to happen to you, and what you need to learn is how to deal with that on your own. That's the best protection your mother can provide in the final analysis, is to allow you to be challenged, to build competence. And that takes a fair bit of forbearance on her part. Right? She has to be willing to let you go out there and make mistakes. I remember when my daughter was learning, I bought her these monkey bars. Climb up a ladder, across a ladder, down a ladder. It was pretty high. It was about 8 feet, I think. And she was about 3. She was out in the backyard learning to climb up these monkey bars. It was really interesting to watch her. She'd lift her foot up and lift it up a little higher, lift it up a little higher, and then she'd put her foot on the first rung and put a little weight on it, and then repeat that. Then she'd go up to the first rung, and then she did that with the second rung, like just trial and error, right? A little foray, a little foray, a little foray, mastery, and then a little higher and a little higher. It was a fairly high monkey bar for such a little kid, but we were watching her, and she was doing a good job. We just let her be. And you know, maybe she falls off the monkey bars when she gets to the top and breaks her arm. And then aren't you a terrible parent? And the answer to that is maybe. And maybe not, too. You know, because getting that line between protection and overprotection right, that's tough. So now I'll tell you a little story that you all know. So I'm sure most of you have seen the Disney film Sleeping Beauty. And it's a very interesting film, very interesting story. So the way the story sets itself up at the beginning is there's a king and a queen, father and a mother, let's say, and they're older. They haven't had any kids, so they're older parents. And they really want a child because they're older parents, and they haven't been able to have any kids. And so finally, they have a daughter. They call her Aurora. And they're pretty thrilled about it, and the whole kingdom has a celebration, and it's christening day, and they invite everyone in the kingdom to come, except Maleficent, which is an interesting word because she's an evil queen, but Maleficent means malevolent, right? She's not only that she's Mother Nature, in the negative guise. She's the tragedy of life. That's another way of thinking about it. But she's also malevolent, so she's also betrayal and catastrophe and cruelty. And the king and queen don't invite her to the christening. And you think, well, no wonder. Do you really want something like that at your child's birthday party? Or the christening, let's say? And the answer is, if you don't want that there, then you're that. And that's a hell of a thing to realize. Because if you don't allow your child to encounter what's negative about the world in measured doses, and even what's malevolent about the world, then they don't learn how to weave their way around that or to cope with it. Both of those are important. And then they're laid open to it, and then that's on you. And you're doing it because you don't want any of that in your child's life. You don't want any tragedy, you don't want any malevolence, which is why they don't invite her to the evil queen to the wedding. And then what happens later in the story, well, Maleficent says she's going to either kill Sleeping Beauty, and that's because people who aren't prepared are more likely to die, or it's modified in the story so that she'll only become unconscious. And what does that mean? Well, that's what happens, to people who can't cope with the catastrophe of the world, is that they are tempted by unconsciousness. Maybe they want to sleep all the time, they want to avoid, they're afraid to confront anything, right? They want to shrink back instead of advancing forward. And to advance forward, in some sense, is to advance forward with full consciousness and courage, and to shrink back is to wish for unconsciousness and maybe even death. And so when Sleeping Beauty hits puberty, she falls in love instantly with some guy she meets in the forest, which is not really something to be recommended. And she falls too hard and too fast for anyone who's sensible, and then finds out that that's a love that's not meant to be. And she's so catastrophically destroyed by that Maleficent is able to entice her into unconsciousness. And so then she's asleep. And she's asleep because the world's too much for her. She wants to be asleep. The rest of the story is about, I think it's Prince Philip, the hero, who confronts Maleficent, who transforms herself into a dragon and attempts to destroy him. And he confronts her successfully and hacks his way through all the thorns that she's put around the castle and wakes Sleeping Beauty up. And you can think about that in a sort of cynical way, that this poor unconscious girl needs the hero, who's a man, to save her from the catastrophe of nature and malevolence and tragedy. But you can also read it psychologically, and you can say that it's the awakening of the spirit of the hero and the conscious willingness to advance in the face of tragedy and malevolence that's the proper antidote to the desire for unconsciousness in the face of the vicissitudes of life. And you can also read it as a romance, because to some degree, women who have to take care of infants do depend on men to confront the world and protect them. But it's very nicely read as a psychological story as well, and it's accurate. Now, back to the man who wrote me about his fantasies. the parts of his brain that are bringing mind, psyche, that are bringing those memories of being humiliated back are part of an alarm system. It's the same alarm system that tells you when something unexplored is dangerous. And if you're in a social situation, and the consequence of being in this situation is that you're being humiliated and undermined, then obviously you haven't mapped out that situation very well. Now, there might be all sorts of reasons, and some of them might not be your fault, but it doesn't really matter as far as these alarm systems are concerned, because all they're concerned about is the fact that you don't know what to do when you're in that situation, and that's not good for you, and you can't forget it. And the reason you can't forget it is, what if you're in that situation again? And so the alarm system says, well, what if you're in that situation again? What if you're in that situation again? What if you're in that situation again? And often traumatic memories are repetitive for people. They can't get them out of their minds, and then they try to avoid them. And that just makes it worse, because what you tell the alarm system when it rings the alarm, if you try to ignore it, is that the alarm is about something so terrifying that you won't even admit to the fact that there's an alarm. And so that just makes the alarm go off more. And so you try to avoid, and, well, that doesn't work. That's something sort of akin to Freudian repression. And so what I recommended to this gentleman was that he write down all the times he was humiliated. It's like, so you've got these memories that won't let you go, you know, these people who took advantage of you. What happened exactly? That's hard to figure out, right? And maybe now he's a little smarter than he was in high school, because maybe he's 4 years older. It's like, what exactly happened? Because the memory will be emotion-laden, but there's a lot of detail around it that's really relevant. You know, and one of the things you can do when you confront a memory like that, which is to confront the terrible things that happened to you in the past, which is the same as confronting terrible things per se, is you can ask yourself, well, exactly what happened, and exactly what part did I play, perhaps, and are there things that I could have done earlier or different, or is there some manner in which I set myself up for this? You know, and so I've had clients who were pretty seriously bullied at work, and we would go into it, and, you know, as I said, it starts with a few pushes. And they don't respond, and then the pushes get a little harder, and they don't respond. The pushes get a little harder, and then it turns into something. Well, maybe that's really. I mean, I had one client who was bullied into psychosis in high school. She was